Growing up in Georgia, it was difficult, far back as I can remember. Raised in a single parent household. My mom, I think she did the best she could, being an adult now and, understanding more about the things that she had to go through when we was younger. Me and my brother, was two boys in the household. So she was gone a lot because she had to work. So spent a lot of time by myself, me and my brother at home. Took care of him a little bit, but like she just didn't disown us or anything. She just was busy trying to take care of us. But she was very active in our life as well. Raised us up, taught us about God when we was young. She didn't really leave it to the preacher to bring her kids to the Lord or whatever. She really taught us the scriptures at home. She had gave her life to Christ, and she lived out her faith by wanting us to believe as she believed. And my dad wasn't in my life often when I was younger. I used to see him here and there, so it was kind of difficult, growing up. And we lived in a rough neighborhood as well. Lived in a neighborhood called Pleasant Hill, and just crime-filled, poverty, very impoverished, drug-infested. So at a young age, I got, acclimated with street life and, participating in those type of activities when I was younger. I looked up to all the wrong people, wrong men. I looked up to drug dealers, my neighborhood, and I was attracted to that kind of lifestyle, easy money, fast money. It seemed like the drug dealers had it going on. They had the girls, the cars, the money, the nice clothes, very popular. So I was attracted to that type of image as a young man. Drug dealers, people that had money, people that had motion, people that had things going on. I wanted to be like that. So I didn't have a proper figure in my life. And my mom, she was in relationships throughout my childhood, but none of it was like solidified. So I really never had even a stepfather that really actually fathered me in that way. What pulled me toward the streets probably, I believe, was the attraction that I had to the things that were going on that I thought was good. At least would be good for me. Would put me in a better situation than I was in. Put some money in my pocket. Would would get me some kind of status in the neighborhood. Wanted to fit in. I didn't want to be somebody that was considered lame. I wanted to be with the in crowd. I don't really consider myself a follower. I'm a leader, but I was being a follower, in that space in my life. So it started around about maybe the end of my 13th year, going to age 14, when I really got into the streets, selling drugs, gang affiliated, got started committing crimes, smoking marijuana, selling crack cocaine. All of this from age 14 to 16 was just really pretty much the I would say the worst years of my life in the space of the stuff that I was doing. Because at 14 is when I kind of jumped off the porch and got into the streets, but at age 16 is when I got arrested for 3 counts of armed robbery and kidnapping. So from 14 to 16, that was me doing God knows what. I took pride in the drug dealing. I took pride in the affiliation, the gang affiliation. I took pride in being this free-spirited person that wanted to do what he wanted to do. I'm 14 at the time, so of course I'm doing my own thing. I'm not obeying anybody, not listening to my mom. She tells me not to go outside, not to stay out all night. I stay out all night. So pretty much I'm just living my own life, thinking I'm the leader and in control of my own life. So I took pride in that, being able to do what I wanted when I wanted to do it. Before that, in that space of 14 to 16, there's a lot of things that I did. that was very criminal, but I didn't get caught for it. But at 16, when I robbed for the first time, well, we got charged with 3 counts of armed robbery. It was me and my 2 friends. We got charged with 3 counts of armed robbery. We got caught after the 3rd armed robbery, but all of the robberies took place within maybe a space of a month, because we did a robbery, and then maybe a month later, a few weeks later, we did another robbery, and then another robbery the same day. So we did like 2 in one day, and after that second time, we got caught that day. So I was 16 at the time when I actually started getting in trouble. And that was my first time getting locked up as well. But I got locked up for such a big charge. I was charged as an adult at the age of 16. They charged me as an adult. After we had committed the robbery, it was May 22nd, I believe, of the year 2002. We had committed, this is our 3rd robbery. We went into this lady's house, and so she went in her driveway. We was walking in this neighborhood, near our neighborhood, near Pleasant Hill. We was outside of that. So we was walking in the neighborhood. We seen a lady go down her driveway, turn in, and we started walking down her driveway. So when we got there, her car was open, door was open. So I could tell she was taking groceries into the house. You know, probably not thinking nothing, just normal activity for her. We end up going in the house with her, behind her, and me and my 2 friends, they had guns. They put the guns on her. I went in the room looking through, rambling through, trying to find jewelry, money, anything like that. I came out the room. They was gone. I'm face to face with the lady, like me and you face to face. And she asked me, did I want to leave? And I said, yes. And she moved out the way. She opened the door and she let me leave. Ran for like a mile, 2 miles, maybe, to get back to my neighborhood. Went back to our neighborhood. We thought everything was just okay. Like, we just entered into a whole nother world where we wasn't going to be suspected that we had did anything. So we were sitting on a porch at a 4-way stop. Seen the police come up on a motorcycle. He looked at us. You seen him get on his radio, and he went across. Then we seen him begin to turn around. When he hit the U-turn, we broke up, started running, and we all met up at my homeboy's house and changed clothes. I guess we thought that was gonna kind of set us apart where they wouldn't know, but we changed clothes, and we ended up standing in the house. Next thing we know, we looked out the window. The police had police cars filled the street where we was, and they came in with the guns, pointing guns at us. I guess they wasn't aware that we didn't have a gun or that we was young, but they came in, they put us down, handcuffed, took us downtown. It was scary. That was my first time being handcuffed, but not my first run-in with the law. It was scary because I didn't know what was gonna happen. And there was some part in my mind where I thought, because I was young, that they wasn't gonna do anything severe to me, you know. Thought we would probably go down here, maybe do about 30 days, 60 days, and then we'll come home. But I didn't know I was facing all the charges I was facing. And because of the crimes that we committed, I was facing about 50 years plus, 3 counts of armed robbery and kidnapping. And in the state of Georgia, these are deadly sin crimes that carry all this time per count. I wanted to fit in. I didn't want to be the one person that said, you know what, I don't want to do it. I didn't want to be the scared one. So when we put it out there and everybody agreed to it, I couldn't be the one that disagreed. That's what I was saying, like my leadership. I got a chapter in my book called Following the Crowd, and it's talking about me being a leader, but yet leading people the wrong way. Because all I had to say was, no, we're not doing this. And it would have changed the whole trajectory of my life. Because they would have listened to me being the oldest, they would have went along with me that it wasn't a good idea. But because I agreed, we all did it. May 2002, that's when I went into the juvenile system. I didn't get my time until October the 7th, 2002. So we're talking May, June, July, August, September. So 5 months. Going to different facilities. I end up going to maybe 3 or 4 juvenile facilities before I actually caught my time and went to prison. That was a rough, being in the juvenile can be rough for anybody, especially going to the juvenile prisons where people already got their times. It's more aggressive and different things like that. You being a new face coming in, people test you, want to fight you, see what you're about. But it was difficult for me because it was my first time leaving home ever in my life. My first time leaving home was me being incarcerated. So missing my mom, missing my brother, missing the daily activities, and things we used to do in the neighborhood. It was very rough for me, and it's something I had to get used to because as time went on, I started to find out that I wasn't going home when I thought I was going home. It wasn't going to be 30 days and go home, 60 days. It was going to be years. My first plea bargain was 15 years. Then they gave me a plea bargain for 20 to 14. 20 years total, 14 incarcerated, 6 on paper. I end up pleading the First Offender Act. I pled out to 10 years, 10 to 4. So 10 years total, 4 incarcerated, 6 on probation. Hearing the judge sentence me when I was in the courtroom was very surreal because, although I knew what I was facing by this time, I'm aware of the severity of my charges. It's a part of me that it just really felt like the judge was going to be very lenient, at least to the point where I didn't have to go to prison. It's one thing to just do juvenile time, but it's another thing to be charged as an adult. That at some point in your juvenile sentence, you're going to have to elevate to go to adult prison. And that's at age 17. So I was 16 when I went in. So when I turned 17, that's when they sent me to prison, the adult prison. So no longer juvenile. So it was very sobering too. My mom, my uncle, they were there. We all cried because, it was for sure I was going to be gone for a few years. And because people don't really know what prison is like other than what you see on TV or what you see on a movie or anything like that. You don't know what's on the other side of that. Some people go to prison, they don't make it home. Some people have bad experiences in prison, even in a short space of time. Everybody's not doing 10, 20, 30 years in prison. Some people do 1 year, but that 1 year could be very bad for them in that space, depending on the type of person they are. Because everybody can't defend themselves in prison. And prison is a place that you really have to stand up and be a man. And or you will be prey to people that will be predators to you. First night prison, for me it wasn't bad because this how it was set up. So when I went to prison, of course you're thinking people gonna try you young. I'm 17 when I go in. They cut all my hair off. You had to strip naked in front of everybody. So it's a busload full of men just standing there. Everybody had to be stripped down, shaved, had to shower, had to go through the process, the intake process, and then you get put in a 2-man cell. So it ain't bad like you get put in a room with 90 inmates and you could be exposed to anybody. So my first night, I think I was in the room by myself, so I didn't even have a roommate. So it wasn't a bad first night for me. Psychologically, being sentenced 4 years and put in prison was very tormenting because what made it real rough for me was because my mom was dealing with things on the outside too that I had no control over. She was in a relationship that was not a good relationship. Things were happening to my little brother. And that's when I began to see that like I have no control. Like my life is just, it's going, but I don't have no control on it. I just have to really just trust the Lord, and I wasn't into trusting the Lord in that space of time in my life. I didn't even fully understand all of that, although my mom had taught me all the things that she taught me. But it really sobered me up, and it really brought me to a place where it's a lot of days where I just sat in my cell and teared up, just thinking about reading the letter that my mom wrote me and things she was telling me that was going on outside that I had no control over, that I couldn't even help her with. Made me want to even change, to be in a position where I could always be in a position to help her if she need help, or help my brother, or help the people in my family. It was very scary because I was in the juvenile, and so I didn't get tricked, but there was like a little glitch in the system. On your 17th birthday, it don't matter what day it fall on, it could be the weekend, they're coming to pick you up. So I turned 17 in the juvenile, and I knew I was supposed to go to prison, but no one came and got me. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I get to do my time in the juvenile. I felt better about it because I had been in the juvenile for a little while, so I kind of knew the ropes. I knew how to move around. I had a little respect, so everything was okay. So 4 days after my 17th birthday, they pulled up at the gate, and they came and got me, shackled me down, told me I graduated to the big boys, and they put me in the front of the bus, and all these grown men are behind me in the bus, shackled up. And I just knew, in your mind you think, because you hear stories in the juvenile about when you go to prison, what you got to do. Like, you gotta stand up, you got to fight, can't let nobody treat you wrong or anything like that. So I'm already kind of preparing my mind that I'm going to leave here the same way I came. One of the worst things I seen that happened was a young guy that I know got killed there. Somebody was trying to rape him. They broke his neck. They were trying to put him to sleep and choke him, but they ended up breaking his neck. I talk about it in my book too. His name was Wayne Boatwright. Was a good guy. I could consider him a friend, at least an associate. But he ended up dying. He was 18, just turned 18, and somebody was trying to rape him, broke his neck, killed him in there. And not just that, but in that space of time, a lot of young people was getting preyed on by older inmates. If I can remember correctly, we used to go to bed. They used to make us go to bed, go to our room, at least clear the day room, at 1 a.m. on the weekend. So that's Friday, Saturday night. So this is on the weekend. This is a Saturday night. I remember because the next day, I believe they had church or something going on. So this is like a Saturday night, and they made us go up at 11 p.m. So, whenever something like that going on, we're going up early, something is going on, something major. So they had to lock us down. So I'm in my room, and I look down, I look across outside the door, and I see them bring Boatwright out on a stretcher. And I seen a GBI vehicle come down, look like an ambulance looking vehicle they was in. They brought Wayne Boatwright out, and his body looked blue, although I was far away from where I was able to see, but I could tell that his body was it was discolored. It was like bluish looking. He was a very bright skinned guy, but his body was looking bluish. They brought him out, and so after that, didn't hear anything. To the next morning, we found out he had died and what had actually happened. It was very sobering to me, because that's when I really realized that you can really not make it back home. That you can come to prison and you could die in prison. He didn't plan to die in prison. I think he only had 5 years to serve, 18 years old. I don't think that was his plan, but he did. Being around the wrong crowd, being in the wrong space, not being, security minded and aware. And he ended up in a room with 3 guys that was trying to do something to him. It affected me because he was young, I was young. We was on the juvenile together. Because in prison, they have a juvenile space for 17-year-olds. All 17-year-olds is on this dorm together. But when you finna turn 18, they send you across the general population with everybody else. So we had a bond from being on the same dorm as a 17-year-old. So seeing somebody like him that really hit home, you know, because the space we was in, we was in one of the worst units in the prison at the time because of our bad behavior. See, in prison, if you continue to do bad things, get a lot of write-ups, disrespectful, insubordinate, you get write-ups, and it takes your security level up. And the more your security level rises, the worse unit they'll put you on. So we ended up in the bad unit because we did a lot of bad things, you know, getting rolled up, little silly stuff that adds up, and then it puts you in a bad space where people are really getting hurt, killed, molested, all type of stuff is going on down here in these units, in the bad security units. It was a common thing for everybody to do. For the most part, the juveniles, this was wild. You know, you got to think about it. We all young. We've been given all this time. You know, 10 years is a lot of time. You know, I'm 16. You know, and I only had to serve 4 years, but even that, you in a space where everybody is serving big time. You know, you could be, I'm serving 4 years with a roommate who's serving life, you know, and he's a teenager and he's got life, you know. So it's like you have this sense of, you know, that you're out of control. Nobody tell me what to do, you know, and you do what you want to do. So that just was the culture in there. And I fell in line with that, but that's how I was before I got there as well, even on the street. Remember I told you I did what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be alone in my decision to do the right thing. You know, if I didn't have I'm following the crowd. If the crowd is all doing right, then I was doing right. If the crowd is all doing wrong, I'm doing wrong, because I just had a need to fit in and not be left out. After Boatwright died, they started shipping all the young people out to prison. I got sent to a prison called Handcuffed State Prison. It was a rough prison as well. But it was there, maybe 2 weeks of being there or so, that I had this encounter with the Lord, where I felt the Lord embracing me, like grabbing me, and he began to speak to me. I was in the middle of a service. Somebody was preaching about Lazarus being raised from the dead, and I knew that it was really speaking to me, but I knew that I was alive. So it's like I didn't have understanding, but I understood at the same time, because I knew it's like the pieces started to come together. I knew that there was a spiritual rising from the dead that needed to happen. God began to tell me things, told me that Jesus was the only way to follow, you know, in life. Like he was it. He was the way into heaven. He also told me that I was his enemy. And I didn't understand that, because me being so small, him being so big, I didn't understand how could I be God's enemy until I read James chapter 4, verse 4, who said, "You're a friend of the world, you're enemy to God." And he told me that I wasn't a Christian. And I had been professing I was my whole entire, childhood, teenagehood. I always professed to be a Christian because my mama taught us the word. We went to church, but I didn't understand that my lips and lifestyle had to match for it to be authentic. That I'm not just a Christian because I say I am, but it's by my belief in Christ. But my belief is action. You know, I follow Christ by the things I do, not just the things I say. You know, so all these things came at that time where God was showing me, and I asked Christ to come into my heart. I asked God to forgive me in that space, and he changed me. It was February 19, 2005 when this had taken place. I was in the cafeteria. The cafeteria was full. It was a church service. Someone came. They was preaching about Lazarus. And I had this encounter with God in the midst of all of this that was already going on. You know, I didn't repeat a prayer to nobody. I didn't shake nobody's hand. And even after that, I didn't even go and tell the minister that I got saved. I got up, went back to my dormitory, completely changed. I started experiencing conviction after that, and that was like brand new to me. I would do things that I was doing before, that I felt bad about. It felt wrong, that I shouldn't do. I was writing secular lyrics, music, and that was one of the first things God dealt with me about. I had notebooks full, and I started balling all of them up. And people in the dormitory, they didn't understand what was going on. They thought I was crazy. They was like, why don't you get this to your brother? Why you stopping? But they didn't understand what had happened. And I tried to explain to the best of my ability what had happened to me and what Christ and what God had done for me. But a lot of people just didn't understand it. It didn't really change the way people treated me. People still treated me the same, although they seen me different, because I had certain respect around the unit. Nobody like messed with me or anything. But I guess some people probably just want to see how long it would last, I guess. Well, that was 20 years ago, so still lasting. But everybody in prison is not just lost and wayward, though. So you had a lot of people that were believers, that they actually knew what was going on with me, and they was able to articulate more of what was going on. I had a little small community in there. There was a few brothers who actually was in love with God, who I began to read the Bible with, pray with, fast with, different things like that. So my journey and my growth while I was in prison had a lot to do with three main disciplines I had, and it was I really became a student of the Word. And I'm not talking about a lot of just studying Greek, Hebrew type stuff. I mean, like, I began to read the Bible like all the time. I was reading the Bible, and God gave me grace to understand what I was reading. Because, before I would read the Bible, my mom would send me scriptures to read, but I didn't really grasp it. But after Christ came into my life, when I would read the Bible, I would literally understand more and more. Like, the more I read, I would understand. And that was like me really, I spent a lot of time with God. Spent a lot of time alone with God, reading my Bible, praying, and going to as many services as I can go to. That was about God. That was about Jesus Christ. Like, I can remember maybe going to church maybe 4, 5, 6 times a week sometimes, if they was preaching the Word of God. I stayed in the space to hear the Word of God, and outside of that, reading my Bible, and God began to really change me and deal with me. There are a few people I remember that was thinking something was wrong with me, because there were people from my city that knew me from the streets and in there. And I used to do secular rap before I started rapping about God. And I had these songs that was filled with murder, violence, all type of things. And they would love to hear me rap. And I stopped doing that, And I remember one of the last times I did it, because I went against my own word. Somebody kept asking me, one of my old friends. And I actually started doing one of my old songs. And it's like I got highly convicted to the point where I said I'm not rapping about that no more. And that's when I knew I was changed too. And I started writing songs about God. But before I switched over, I stopped doing music altogether, because I didn't think that you could rap for God. Who raps for God? I just thought it was all just bad. So it was something that I actually gave up when I got saved, along with smoking and different things that I was doing. God really began to change me, and I started just laying things down. And maybe, getting to my word and reading and spending time with God, that's in that space was when it was revealed to me that I could still do music, but do it for Him, So I started doing that. So I've been writing songs about God for 20 plus years now. How I got into music. It started when I was young. I had a friend named Prince. I met him when he was 12. I was 14. One of the coolest young people I know. I met him walking home from school one day. And over time, we became very close friends. One of my best friends to this day. But he used to always rap, just freestyle, talk about anything. He was very good at it. And I picked up the gift of rapping. I started rapping. When it first started, I was 14 years old. And, of course, rapping about things that I was into: money, sex, drugs, street stuff, gangster stuff. But at the age of 19, when I gave my life to Christ, remember I told you that I stopped doing music. And when I stopped doing music, started spending more time with God, and he revealed to me that I could still do it. I started writing songs about God's love originally when I was 19, and then that had just grown to me just writing hundreds of songs about God, about the Bible, just things that I'm into now, and my heart for God, and just giving instructions and rapping about Bible scriptures and just life on this side with Christ. I want my music to have a deep impact for the kingdom of God, that even when I'm dead and gone and, with Christ, that my music that's around can still point people to him, can share my story of how I was broken, I was lost, I was hopeless, but I put my trust in Christ, and he gave me hope. He brought light into my darkness, that he changed me, and that he's real, and that he can be felt, and that he can change anybody. Because there are a lot of people that are seeking, but they're just seeking in the wrong spaces. But I want my music to be very impactful to help point them in the right direction. And then I got a job at the same juvenile facility that I was once housed in as a youth, where I was incarcerated at. They hired me on, and I worked alongside other officers who was there when I was incarcerated, and they were officers. Now I'm working alongside those same officers. So this is years later, after just, trial and error from job to job, trying to find my place in life. Worked here 5 months, worked here 6 months, worked at Sam's Club for like 15 months, and just trying to find my space in life. I was all over the place until I got with the juvenile justice system in Georgia, where I actually was there the longest I ever been in one space, which was almost 7 years before I moved to Texas. If I hadn't moved to Texas, I would still be working with the juvenile justice system in Georgia. First of all, I can't believe that I'm in a place that's considered, this is a real jail, that I can leave and come as I want to. I don't have to wait on nobody to let me out. I can go out the front door and get in my car, and I can come back later. It was amazing. I was probably one of the happiest JCOs you could ever meet, man, because a part of me, like, I knew that I wasn't supposed to be there, but that I was supposed to be there. I mean, I knew I wasn't supposed to be there probably because of the things I've done in life. I've been incarcerated. I was a juvenile at one time. I've been to prison, but I knew I was supposed to be there because it was God's providence to bring it full circle. And he wanted me there to impact the space that I was in, that I was serving in. I believe I impacted it a lot, man. I taught a lot of the young guys, how to pray, how to have faith in God, what it looked like. I was different from a lot of other people because I actually lived my faith on the job as well, not just on Sunday morning. So, they knew what I was about. And they knew I was serious about Christ, serious about God. So it was a very good time that I had with a lot of those youths that even still keep up with me to this day, look up to me for encouragement, or for a word of prayer, anything like that. I started as a cadet, then I went to JCO 1, JCO 2, and I became a sergeant. Then I became a lieutenant. Then I became a trainer over all of the staff, security and non-security, training them how to, to do their job and And then I went from being a trainer to a volunteer coordinator, and then I went from being a volunteer coordinator to a teacher, with the education system with Department of Juvenile Justice in Georgia. So it's like, and that was like my home base was the central office. So in my mind, or if you can look at my job history, it goes from me being all the way down here to all the way up here to, in my mind, to the top per se. And me being who I am with no degree, no, just experience, no cosign, just God and His grace. If God could change me, that He can change anybody. Because I was real messed up, broken, lost. Was in a space that I thought I was close to God, and I wasn't. I professed to be a Christian. He had to tell me that I wasn't. I wouldn't have found out on my own. I thought that, I could do it. I could just say that, I was a Christian. In America, we Christian by default, it seemed like. But we both know that that's not true, that America's not Christian, or a lot of people in America's not even Christian. But there are people that follow Christ. And I just want people to walk away with, God took this young black boy from the slums, and changed him. Redemption in my life is truly the faithfulness of God. That He is who He said He is. That He'll do what He said He'll do. When we read stories in the Bible, and you see God and His faithfulness and how He redeems people and how He revenges people, God really did a whole, like, I want to say, turned my life 180, going in a whole different direction. But He brought full circle, 360, things that happened when I was younger. From me being in juvenile to working with juvenile, from me being incarcerated, from me being a staff member, and being in a space where I can relate to and better understand youth, because I was behind that door at one time. I was locked in that cell at one time. I had that uniform on at one time. I sat in that same seat that you're sitting in. I sat in that seat at one time. I had to do things that I didn't want to do, that the officers made me do. I've been in that space, so I can relate to tell you that there is another side to this, and that this is not the end of your story. It's like God put me in a place to be able to tell youth that their life is not over, because look at what He did for me. And I was in the same shoes that you have on, literally the same shoes, meaning the jail shoes that you got on. I wore a pair of those myself.
What would you say your base prayer is for those kids, or kids that the men, women still trapped in the life that you got out of?
My prayer is that Christ, Spirit of God, that God will meet them, that God will visit them while they're there, like He visited me. That He would literally, like, invade their space. That's my prayer, and that they'll never be the same, and that they can ultimately experience freedom although they're locked up. Because that's what I did mention. When I gave my life to Christ, when Christ came into my life, although I was locked up, there was a freedom on the inside that I felt that was unreal, because I was set free inside, although I was incarcerated on the outside. If I could go back in time and talk to the teenage Michael, 14, 15, 16 years old, I would say, if you don't change, your life is going to be very hard. And it's going to be your fault, not anyone else's. I would also say, believe in the God that your mother tells you about. And put your faith in him. Right. I would also say that you are more than what you have become. Sounds like the quote off The Lion King. But, you are more than what you become. But sincerely, I would tell myself that. Because at that time, that's when I was developing into somebody who I wasn't. But I was doing it to survive. I was doing it to fit in. I was doing it to make myself somebody. But that was never the life I was supposed to live. I would talk to them, somebody who was on the fence, I would talk to them about loyalty and what does it mean to them. Most people that I know who are in the streets, we understand what loyalty means because we are loyal to things. I know people personally that will die for the streets that they represent and claim, gang-wise. They will die for a color. They will literally lay their lives down for a color, So we know what loyalty means, but then we have to tie loyalty to God and ask the question, are we really being loyal to him? A lot of people do a lot of things. We feel like my homeboy, he'll ride for me, I'll ride for him. But when we understand the life of Christ and what he actually did for us, it'll cause us to be more loyal to him. When we really grasp that, yeah, Christ died on the cross. And that sounds, we've heard that story, but he actually did it for you. How do you respond to that, I am living proof that through Christ, you can have a new life. That you can be changed. And that you can really live for him. You could please him. I'm living proof of that. Before God, I was alone. And I was broken. I was trying to find my way. And after God, now, I found my way. And my way is Christ, who is the way. And I'm in the light, I'm in the light now. I want to leave a legacy of that I went hard. That I went hard for the Lord Christ. That I fell down many times in this space of 20 years walking with the Lord. But that when I got up, I got back to trying to please him again. That I never gave up on striving to be holy and telling others about Jesus. And that he is worthy of our pursuit. No matter how many times you fall, you can get up and try again. Don't stop trying to get close to him. Don't stop trying to know him. Because the more we know him, the more we love him, and the more we love him, the more we'll obey.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the God Behind Bars podcast. And I just want to thank you as a listener for your continued support and encourage you to share this with as many of your friends and family as possible. It is our heart and goal to tell the story of what God is doing behind bars with as many people as possible. And so as you share this amongst your friends and family and on your social networks, it allows us and supports that goal. Number 2 is if you would love to make a gift to God Behind Bars to help us continue the work and to grow the platform of what's happening here as a ministry, I want to encourage you to go over to godbehindbars.com/donate. And no matter what you can give, it all helps in making the mission and vision of introducing as many people to Jesus as we possibly can and connecting them to the local church. And so thank you so much again for being a listener. And we pray that this encourages you just as much as you've been an encouragement to us.